Let's face it, withdrawing from your assets is scary. Just the thought of drawing down from your investments when you become financially independent is a pretty scary concept because no one wants to run out of money and no one wants their net worth to go down. That's why you need to have a smart withdrawal strategy in place for when you go to withdraw your money when you become financially independent. Now make sure that you stay to the end of this video because we are going to discuss the tax implications of withdrawing while you're financially independent. And that's really important to know. What else is important to know is the first concept that I want to discuss here, and that is the order of accounts. So generally speaking, it's going to be important for you to withdraw from certain accounts first and try to save different accounts for last, for when you're withdrawing from those accounts, when you're supporting yourself while you're financially independent. And in most circumstances, of course, it can be different depending on what your individual circumstance is, and you should definitely do more research on this. But in most circumstances, it's probably going to be more beneficial for you to first start with withdrawing from your regular taxable investment account, okay? Because you want your tax advantage accounts to grow further. So you might have a traditional account, like a traditional IRA. You might have a Roth IRA, or a Roth account, and you should hopefully have like consolidated your accounts and maybe only have one of each, so it makes it easier. But the first thing you're probably going to want to withdraw from is your taxable account, and that's because there's no tax advantages of having money in there. And so depleting that account first would be the most ideal, while letting your traditional accounts grow tax deferred and letting your Roth IRA grow tax-free. The next account that you're going to want to withdraw from is those traditional accounts. You ideally want to save your Roth accounts for the very end because not only are they growing tax-free, but you can withdraw money from them tax-free in the future. And so you want that to grow as big as possible. So after the taxable accounts, you're most likely going to want to go after your traditional accounts. And if you're not 59 and a half already, then that means you might face a penalty. But of course, there are ways to get around that early withdrawal penalty if you're financially independent before the age of 59 and a half. You have such methods as the 72T rule, and of course you have the Roth IRA ladder, which is my personal favorite and the one that I am currently doing right now. And I do have videos on those two concepts, by the way, so make sure that you look for those two videos if you're interested in learning more about avoiding the early withdrawal penalty when you become financially independent at an early age. But that's the order of accounts that I think is going to apply in most circumstances. The next concept that I want to cover here is market fluctuations. So while you're financially independent and you're withdrawing from your assets, you're probably most likely going to experience some drastic market fluctuations. And that could be a bear market, which is where your investments go down by at least 20%, like the general broad stock market goes down for 20% for a prolonged period of time. You could also experience the opposite of that, which is a bull market, which is where they go up by about 20%. And that's a really good thing because your assets are worth more. But more specifically, we want to try to minimize the damage from bear markets. So if the market drops by 20% or more for a prolonged period of time, obviously our investments, our assets are going to be temporarily worth less than they were when the market was at an all-time high. And if we're withdrawing the same amount of money from those bear markets, then that means that we're depleting our portfolio much faster than we were before. And in order to withdraw money while we are financially independent during a bear market, we want to try to withdraw less, right? Sounds pretty obvious, but it's very important to withdraw less. And one rule that you can follow for this is known as the 95% rule. So the 95% rule basically says that if the market is lower, like significantly lower than what it was when you first started your withdrawals, then you're going to want to try to withdraw 95% of what you did on the last withdrawal. So if you withdrew, let's say $1,000, this is just for easy math, you're going to want to withdraw 95% of that, which is going to be $950. So you're going to have to try to cut $50 out of your budget during that withdrawal. And I did a complete video on the 95% rule, by the way, so if you're interested in learning more about that and you haven't watched that already, definitely make sure you check out that video because it's really cool and really important for financial independence. Otherwise, if you're not experiencing a bear market or a prolonged market downturn, it's usually safe if you're following the 4% rule or less. It's usually going to be safe for you to just continue withdrawing how much you were withdrawing before. And actually, the 4% safe withdrawal rule does account for adjusting for inflation. So if inflation was 3% that year, you can increase your withdrawals by 3% that year. And historically speaking, you're going to not run out of money in a prolonged period of time. And if you don't need to adjust for inflation, then don't adjust for inflation. If it didn't affect you by 3%, if you didn't need to raise your spending by 3%, then don't do it. And that's how you're going to deal with drastic market fluctuations while you're financially independent. The next really important concept of withdrawing money while you're financially independent is going to have to do with your asset allocation. Because whenever you go to withdraw from your investments, you can kind of think of it as doing like a really mini rebalance of your portfolio. All right. So if your asset allocation is 80% stocks and 20% bonds, just for example, and it happens to be at the time of your withdrawal that your stocks are 78% and your bonds are 22%, then what you can do is just take your withdrawal from your bonds. So you're kind of almost you're taking down your bonds, and that should bring you closer to the proper asset allocation. Now, your asset allocation doesn't need to be absolutely perfect every single time. It doesn't have to be 80-20 every single time, and as soon as it goes up 1%, you have to rebalance. No, you don't have to do that, but you're kind of doing like a mini rebalance when you're withdrawing from the asset that is more appreciated, that is kind of throwing your asset allocation a little bit out of whack. Here's an example I'll just put up on the screen real quick. If that was your asset allocation, then you can just withdraw from the winner, the one that is appreciated a little bit more than the others, and try to bring it closer back to your proper asset allocation. And next, I want to talk about something that is very rarely talked about, and that is the frequency of your withdrawals. How often should you be withdrawing money from your investments when you're trying to sustain yourself in financial independence? But before I move on to that, please make sure that you like this video if you're enjoying this video so far. It really does help me out, and I really do appreciate that. Just by hitting that like button, you are letting the YouTube algorithm know that you like this video and you want other people to see this video. So it really does help me out, and it really does help a lot of other people out as well. So thank you so much for hitting that like button. Now we can move on to the frequency of withdrawals. So when you're financially independent, you're going to have to withdraw money from your portfolio, but how often should you do it? Originally, I believe the 4% withdrawal rule was originally based on withdrawing at the beginning of the year and only one withdrawal for the entire year. However, I don't think this is the best option to do it, because you are basically almost timing the market on a very small scale. So you are withdrawing all of your money, like your entire annual spending, at one time. And that's going to present a lot of opportunity cost, because the money that you withdrew, let's say at the beginning of the year, that could have stayed invested. Most of it could have stayed invested and possibly have earned you more income and increased your net worth, on a small scale throughout the entire year. And that's because, generally speaking, the more time that you're invested in the market, the better off you're going to be. And that's why I think a really great strategy for us to withdraw from our investments is to do what's like a reverse dollar cost averaging. So when you think of dollar cost averaging, you think of when you're actually putting money into your investments. So maybe you get paid every 2 weeks at work, but every 2 weeks you have a certain amount that comes out of your paycheck, goes into your 401k, goes into your IRA, whatever it may be, and you have it invested. So every single month, or I should say every single 2 weeks, you're investing in the stock market. And so you're kind of dollar cost averaging your way into the stock market by purchasing shares at different prices, whatever price they may be at that time. And so you're getting an average of how much you paid for all those shares. This is kind of the reverse of that. So when you're withdrawing from your portfolio, you might want to do reverse dollar cost averaging. So let's say you withdraw from your portfolio every month, or every 2 weeks, or even every week. So you take your annual spending. So let's say it was $2,000 per month. I'm trying to do some easy math here. So $2,000 per month times 12, that's $24,000. Let's say that you withdraw from it. If you drew from it every month, then you would just set an automatic withdrawal to come out of $2,000 every month from your investments. If you want to do that on a bi-weekly basis, you can do $1,000 every 2 weeks. And so I think that is actually going to be better for you long term, because you're not withdrawing all of your money at once, and you're reverse dollar cost averaging. So you're getting an average of a price when you're selling off your investments, just as if you were when you were buying them. Another really important concept that I wanted to talk about that I mentioned in the beginning, and that is the tax implications. So you always needed to keep taxes in mind when you're making withdrawals for financial independence. Here are some things that you definitely need to keep in mind that you might not even realize. So now that you're living off of your investments, you don't have an employer withholding taxes for you. What this means is that you may actually have to pay quarterly taxes if you are living off of your investments and you're not withholding any taxes. So if you're making, let's say you're bringing in $2,000 per month. If you're just selling off enough investments to bring in $2,000 per month, well, at the end of the year, you might have a tax bill. And the IRS wants you to withhold taxes at least on a quarterly basis. So if you have a large enough tax bill at the end of the year and you didn't withhold any taxes, then the IRS could charge you with some penalties, because they're always trying to look for some extra income for themselves. So that is just something that you always need to keep in mind. You need to plan your withdrawals around a tax strategy. If you're withdrawing from your taxable investments, then obviously you want to sell off your long-term capital gains gains so that you can realize those before you sell off any short-term capital gains, because that's going to be more tax advantageous. If you're taking money from a traditional IRA, then you're going to pay taxes on the amount that you withdraw from that traditional IRA. So maybe you only want to take up to a certain amount. If you're frugal and you can live on the standard deduction, then you want to withdraw up to the standard deduction and then maybe find some other income in another way. You can combine taking money out of a traditional IRA up to the standard deduction, and then you can sell off investments in your taxable account and realize long-term capital gains. And so you have your regular income that's going to be taxed from the traditional IRA plus your taxable long-term capital gains, which is taxed at a much more favorable rate at a much higher income bracket. And so essentially you can find out ways. And so essentially what you can do while you're financially independent is you can very easily find ways to withdraw enough to live off of while paying 0% in federal income taxes. All of this is really important to know and really important to implement once you become financially independent and once you start withdrawing from your portfolio. But even if you're not at that point yet, what you do need to do is you need to learn about how to invest your way to financial independence in the first place. And that's why, if you haven't already, you definitely need to watch this video I created. It's a full guide on investing your way to financial independence. So please make sure you check out that video. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm Zach from OnCashflow.com, and I hope to see you next time.